What if you had no fear? No fear whatsoever. How much could you accomplish? When fear was ever, how can I put it, introduced in your life from when you were young, some fear is good. It's like a person walking to a edge of a cliff, and that fear is a guard. It's an invisible barrier that says, "Don't step further, or else you're gonna." Right? That's it for your life, right? So, fear in the right way is good. Now, the Bible says that God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. Now, that fear that God is talking about is a kind He hasn't given you that spirit of fear, is the kind that opposes faith. The opposite of faith is fear, right? It's unbelief. Okay. So, what can be accomplished if you never had no fear? And I'm talking about people who have basically stepped past the barrier. And I'm talking about the cliff part of it. I'm talking about the part of discovery. I'm talking about going out there and experiencing along the way. And along the way, the guard of fear comes up when you know don't go there, right? Or the guard, the how can I put it? The allowance of faith kicks in, tells you to keep going. We were made as human beings to keep going. We were never ever made to be stagnated. Stagnation usually comes from a lot of times from fear. Freedom, true freedom in life is when you have no fear. Now, we have been trained as human beings, depending upon your family line, societies, whatever, to basically they've set up fences, right? For us not to go beyond that because they haven't. Why? Then they basically, their fear limits you from going beyond the boundaries that they've set, right? That's their ridiculous expectations of how they see life should be lived, right? People are taught from young to get a job. It's kind of interesting. The word job is it's same spelling of the three letters of a guy in the Bible called Job or Job, right? The guy went through a tough time in his life, one crazy thing after another. Now, I don't know if the similarity was done in the English language for it to say getting a job means getting hardship, all right? In life in general, getting a job is only a language. The majority of times that we live our life and we can't live it by faith is because the money is a requirement. It is a huge requirement in life. Unless you have a support system, right? Some people are born into a very good support system. And by the way, the Bible says that the parents ought to lay up for the children and not the other way around. The legacies that left in families was so the future generation would not have it as tough as they did. Unfortunately, some families, they had the dynamics. No, 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 no. Wait a second here. I went through bad stuff. You're going to go through bad stuff. I see life like this. You're going to see life like this. I knew somebody who said her dad said to her that just as the Bible says, we that he said to mankind, you shall work by the sweat of your brow. Well, you know what? Eh, there's other people in life that have not worked by the sweat of the brow, even though dependent upon the time, the generation, the like the depression era, for instance, people had to learn by the sweat of the brow because that's the only way they could get this thing called money, right? Money. So getting back to having, what would you do? What could you do if you never had no fear? One thing is certain: anything is possible. The Bible even says that with God, anything is possible. Jesus even says, according to your faith, be it unto you. So anything is possible. What stops us in the place of fear? especially when you wear it on like a thick coat, even in summer, right? And you sweat and all this other stuff, is that you have been given a garment to wear. And only until you really get out there and you experience other people who have gotten away from that garment, the thick coat that they're wearing, you learn to dress differently. You learn to talk differently. You learn to think differently. You learn and you actually become a different person. In order to be a person, what if you had no fear? What could you do? You had to become a different person. I will say this, and I say this to myself too. Becoming a different person, for the most part of it, is breaking away from the person that you've been given. The people in your life, and if you study them well enough, if they don't know how to break past fear, they will not accomplish a whole lot that gives them the rewards of faith, right? God is always, and you know, I've done my research on this. Do you know people who take risks in life? For the majority of it, I'm not talking about the haphazard or ridiculous or stupid risks. I'm talking about people who take risks. Do you know it eventually works out for them? And when I'm talking about eventual, I'm talking about the time frame, right? Eventually. For some people, it's a shorter time frame. And that time frame was them breaking away from the poison of fear that has been fed to them. Fear comes in so many different faces, so many different garments, right? So many different religious beliefs, heritage belief, cultural belief, your allegiance to your family. Well, this is the way it's done, so we're going to do it this way, right? You start talking the same way, right? And by the way, your language, what comes out of your mouth, basically goes back inside and recirculates, regurgitate, and you end up puking the same results over and over again based on fear. People can't leave marriages. They can't leave a city that's not doing them well. They can't leave a job. They can't even leave their quote unquote life because of fear. And I'll give you an example. And they said that when they train elephants, that they used to put a chain around them, their leg, and from a child, right? From a little baby elephant, right? And when after a certain point they would snip the chain, do you know that elephant never stepped past the line? Because they felt the tug of the chain. And that's the thing, is that fear, if you had no fear, what could you do? If you had no thugging, tug. And it's playing a tug of war. If you didn't have something hidden, invisible, tugging at you, pulling you back, what could you do if you had no more fear? The tremendous possibility, people, I've done it in life too, and I speak to myself too in this, and I admire people who do it. I really do. I'll give you an example. Not to idolize him, need to be careful in this. Jimi Hendrix, his story was that after he left the army, he didn't go back home to the security. He went out with his guitar to basically survive and thrive. From the time he started, there was difficulties along the way, but he did not allow fear. He probably didn't even know the language of fear, but he allowed the faith to carry him. He eventually became a big star, and he loved what he became. But what damaged him in his life was that those who had fears came to manage him, and most of his fans were people of fear, and they offered him drugs. They basically became his Achilles heel. they became his greatest weakness. Along the way of breaking away at the limitations, he expanded, and it expanded even to his music. That musicians who probably didn't have to do what he did and learn what he did along the way didn't experience the liberty in the tones and the kind of zone he entered into, even through his music. It came through his talent. He began to now bow down to fears that he was not going to be able to rise above it, even though it was happening. Okay, just using him as an example, that he gave into the crowd. He gave in. He began to give them more than what they expected. Even and at some point, people with musicians who cared about him, people who did, said he gave in to the people's demand. And by that, he allowed fear to become part of his makeup, his clothing, right? And even though he could let go on the stage, it became, and even though he said it in his summits talks, he said it became a place of frustration for him because he gave into, and fear made him sign contracts that he was now obligated to. He had to submit to that. And even though he wanted to be a musician, he wanted to be a musician in a rightful sense. His art was his form. He had to give into all these other things that damaged the art, right? So he found, yeah, you listen to some of his albums, like, I mean, like, guy's way ahead of his time, totally way ahead of his time. But there was something of a bloom in expansion that you can't find at by people who live by fear, right? And the thing is about fear will make you pay your dues. So will faith also. You pay your dues by escaping fear. What can you do if you never had any fear whatsoever? What can you do? And you know, I heard something recently and I like it. People said live by intention. I like intention. But then I said, no, live deliberately. And I'll end with that. You have the right to live deliberately. And when you do, fear cannot be your friend anymore. Fear is going to be your enemy. And I'm talking about the kind of fear that you step past limitations. I'm not talking about the kind of fear that you will need along the way that checks you. That said, no, don't go there. Right? That emotion, that something rises up to go, no, there's danger there. That kind of fear is good fear. I'm talking about, my talk today is about a kind of fear that you don't want in your life in any way, shape, or form, and you don't want it. It's not a requirement. It's not. It's like the food that you eat. Certain types of food are good, some certain types aren't. Your body, your physiology, your health does not need fear. It's not a food that you can afford to eat anymore in your life. And it starts off with one single brainwave. Just leave my talk as one single brainwave. That you're not about fear, you're about being deliberate. Because faith kicks in. When faith kicks in, that is when the stuff happens. That is when the stuff happens, man. That is when it happens. That is where God is moving. That is where he actually, his very essence is in operation. People have even said that too. They've said that I noticed that when I stepped past and I started to do, the money came out of nowhere. This person showed up. These things started to happen. Alignment. Things begin to align for you in a good way. And when you're operating in fear, things also align to keep you stagnated, stuck, blocked, stay put. And you don't want that. So I'll just end with that again. What can you do? Let that excitement rise up. What can actually happen when you have no fear? Man, the possibilities are endless. It's a beautiful place to be and to stay. And you know what you're going to have to do, man? You got to let go of the people, because oh man, and don't ever share your stuff with people when you start to get an excitement, because they've lost at a certain points in their life. Man, I tried and hell, and this didn't work out. Well, you didn't just try. You took an attempt. There's a big difference between a person who lives deliberately without fear compared to a person who just try. Just try. Don't just try, man. Faith it. Faith it. Don't fear it. Faith it. Have a great day and like and subscribe, man. Man, I hope I'm inspiration to you. Be inspired. Right on.